Chapter 9 of Top of the Ladder, Marine Operations in the Northern Solomons by John C. Chapin. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Epilogue. There were, however, two minor land operations to complete the isolation of Rabaul. The first was at Green Island, just 37 miles north of Bougainville. It was a crusty 8-mile-long, 4-mile-wide, oval ring, 3 islands of sand and coral around a sleepy lagoon, and only 117 miles from Rabaul. To General Douglas MacArthur, it was the last step of the Solomon Islands campaign. The task of taking the island fell to the 5,800 men of the 3rd New Zealand Division under Major General H.E. Barrowclough, less the 8th Brigade which had been used in the Treasuries operation. There was also a contingent of American soldiers, Seabees, and engineers, and cover from air assault marine planes under Brigadier General Field Harris. Rear Admiral Wilkinson had Task Force 31, whose warships would wait for targets, although Green Island would get no pre-invasion bombardment. The atoll ring was too narrow and bombardment would pose a danger to island inhabitants. Late in January 1944, 300 men of the 30th New Zealand Battalion and Seabees and engineer specialists went ashore, measured and sized up the island's potential, found spots for an airfield, checked lagoon depths, and sought accommodations for a boat basin. All of this warned the Japanese, but it was too late for them to do anything. Then, on 14 February, Japanese scout planes warned the 102 defenders on Green Island that a large Allied convoy was on the way, shepherded by destroyers and cruisers. Japanese aircraft from Rabaul and Kahili attacked the convoy by moonlight, but at 0641, the landing craft had crossed the line of departure unscathed and were almost to the beach. Within 2 hours, all were ashore, unopposed. Then the Japanese dive bombers came roaring in, but the Allied anti-aircraft fire and marine fighter planes, VMF-212, were enough to prevent its hits on the transports or beach supplies. New Zealand patrols got only slight resistance, a few brief firefights. By 19 February, the 33rd, 37th, and 93rd Seabees were laying an airfield on the island. By 4 March, a heavy B-24 bomber was able to make an emergency landing on the Green Island Strip. 3 days later, air assault planes were staging there, giving the strip the name Green. Soon, B-24s were there to strike the vast Japanese base at Truk. The second operation saw the seizure of Emerald Island. It was well north of Green Island, 75 miles northwest of the New Ireland enemy fortress of Kahili. Actually, Kahili had been considered as a target to be invaded by the 3rd Marine Division, but higher authorities decided the cost would be too high. Better to let Kahili die on the vine. Taking Emerald and setting up air and naval bases there would effectively cut off the Solomon Islands and the Bismarck Archipelago from the Japanese. It would be a small investment with big results. Emerald is an irregularly shaped island in the St. Matthias group, 8 miles long, 4 miles wide, with much jungle and many hills, but with room for boat basins and airstrips. The natives said there had been no Japanese there since January, and air reconnaissance could find none. The unit selected for the landing bore a famous name in the lore of the Corps, the 4th Marines. The original regiment had been the storied China Marines, and had been part of the desperate defense of Bataan and the subsequent surrender at Corregidor in the Philippines. Now it had been reborn as a new, independent regiment composed of the tough and battle-hardened veterans of the Raider battalions. The 4th Marines arrived at Emerald shortly after 0600 on 20 March 1944. The Marines and sailors fired a few shots at nothing, then the amphibian tractors opened up, wounding one of the Marines. The Seabees got right to work on the airfields, even before the island was secured. In no time they had laid out a 7,000-foot bomber strip and a 5,000-foot stretch for fighters. All was secured until attention fell on a little neighboring island with a Japanese fuel and ration dump. Destroyers blew it all to debris, then spied at sea a large canoe escaping with some of the enemy. Hardly bloodthirsty after this placid operation, the destroyer casually pulled in close. The Japanese chose to fire a machine gun. It was folly. The destroyer was forced to respond. The canoe didn't sink and was brought alongside with the body of a Japanese officer and 26 living enlisted men, who may have privately questioned their officer's judgment. Bougainville finale. These were small affairs compared to the finale on Bougainville. With the withdrawal of the 3rd Marine Division at the end of 1943, after it had successfully fought its way up to the final defensive line, the 2 Army divisions, the 37th Infantry and the Americal, took over and extended the perimeter with only sporadic brushes with the Japanese. Then, in late February and early March 1944, patrols began making almost continuous contact with the enemy. It appeared that the Japanese were concentrating for a serious counterattack. On 8 March, the 145th Infantry of the 37th was hit by artillery fire. Then the 6th Division, parent of the old enemy, the 23rd Infantry, attacked hard. It took 5 days of very severe fighting, with support from a battalion of the 148th Infantry, combined with heavy artillery fire and airstrikes, to drive the determined Japanese back. Meanwhile, the 129th Infantry had also been heavily attacked. The enemy kept coming and coming, and it was a full 9 days before there was a lull on 17 March. On 24 March, the Japanese, after reorganizing, launched another series of assaults with even greater pressure. This time they also threw in 3 regiments of their 17th Division. The artillery of both American divisions, guided by Cub spotter planes, fired the heaviest support mission ever to be put down in the South Pacific area. That broke the back of the enemy attackers, and the battle finally was over on 25 March. Major General Griswold, the Corps commander, after 8 major enemy attacks, wrote in a letter 4 days later, "I am absolutely convinced that nowhere on earth does there exist a more determined will and offensive spirit in the attack than that the Japs exhibited here. They come in hard, walking on their own dead, usually on a front not to exceed 100 yards. They try to effect a breakthrough which they exploit like water running from a hose. When stopped, they dig in like termites and fight to the death. They crawl up even the most insignificant fold in the ground like ants, and they use all their weapons with spirit and boldness. Difficult terrain or physical difficulties have no meaning for them." The Americal Division had advanced along the 37th in the March to April period with its last action 13 to 14 April. This ended the serious offensive action for the 2 Army divisions. The enemy had been driven well out of artillery range of the airstrips, 12,000 yards away. For Americans, this marked the end of the Bougainville saga, a tale of well-trained units filled with determined, skillful men who fought their way to a resounding victory. The 3rd Marine Division had led the way in securing a vital island base with the crucial isolation of Rabaul thus ensured. End of Chapter 9. End of Top of the Ladder, Marine Operations in the Northern Solomons by John C. Chapin. Read by Aaron Bennett.